It's great to be here. It's an honor to be in this role. I love UT. I love Austin, born and raised here. And it's a real treat to have Josh Baer here. Josh is a very, very close friend and has done a tremendous amount for the Austin community. He's been a longtime entrepreneur himself, started multiple companies. We're going to talk about that in detail and what his lessons learned are from those. And most recently has started the Capital Factory. And Capital Factory has become a real force for Austin. In my opinion, it's the strongest incubator we have here. I recently attended the demo day. I was very impressed with the companies presenting. The room was packed with potential investors. And that's pretty amazing because it hasn't been that long since he put one foot in front of the other and started the Capital Factory. So why don't we jump in, Josh, with just how you got started as an entrepreneur. So as a child, what was the initial spark for you?
You know, it's funny, when I look back at my family, I see entrepreneurs everywhere. And they weren't tech entrepreneurs. They didn't start some company that went public. But both of my grandparents on both sides ran small retail stores. Mm-hmm. My father was a photographer, but he had his own little photography studio. And so he ran it out of our house, and he was shooting weddings and bar mitzvahs and portraits and things like that, and had to run his own little business there. My mom was a school teacher, but had a business on the side that she did that went along with my dad's business, doing like invitations and stationery and stuff for all the parties that he did. And it just seemed like everywhere I look around through that, there were entrepreneurs. And so then when I got to college, I went to Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh, and in kind of the first dot-com boom. And I remember I was sitting at some fraternity house the first week of school, like during rush, and kind of meeting different people. And I meet someone that later on became a good friend of mine. And we're sitting on the wall talking about it. And he says, what do you really want to do while you're here at school? What do you want to get out of it? And I said to him right then, I said, I don't really know. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what business it's going to be. But I want to start a company before I leave school. And I was pretty sure that was my path. But I had no idea what that was going to be. I didn't know anything about anything. I didn't know. There was nothing I was passionate about. I just knew I wanted to work for myself, and then I wanted to start a company. And then the way I got involved in my first company was really by accident. And you look at, it's interesting as I've watched you go through your story, and you've developed different businesses, and you've been, in many cases, very, very intentional about it. And for me, most of them were accidents. And my first business was totally an accident. I was working for a software company in college for my freshman year, and I was kind of doing what today would be like a social media intern. There wasn't any social media then, so I was answering questions on news groups and email lists and other places, but like you would on Twitter or Facebook today. And I was doing a little bit of programming, and the people asking for help would hire me on the side to do like consulting work, to like write a little script for them or a little program or customize something. And if their server would break, they'd call me and I might come fix it, and they might order me some pizza or something at the time. And then one day, one of my consulting customers called me up and he said, hey, every time my server breaks, it's a big pain in the ass. It's like it disrupts my business, it disrupts my customers. I don't care so much about paying you to fix it. I just don't want it to break. Mm-hmm. But your server that you run on your computer, at least from my perspective, it runs all the time, because if it breaks, you see it right away and you go fix it, and I don't have to, so how about I just pay you $50 a month and you run my server on yours and you take care of it. And today that doesn't sound like that big of an idea, because most of the time you wouldn't run a server by yourself. But back then there was no such thing as hosting. If you wanted to run a website, you got a computer and you plugged it into the internet and you ran a web server, and then you put web pages on it. You didn't go put it somewhere else. And so this was kind of a new idea of I was going to get paid to host it. And of course, optimistically, I'm thinking, well, nothing's ever going to go wrong, so I'm just getting $50 a month for free. And that was basically the beginning of what became my first company, which was an email hosting business. And so then I was able to organically kind of grow additional customers after that.
And did you employ all students for that business, and were they all
Mostly
At CMU?
fraternity brothers. Yeah, right. It was which is not necessarily a strategy I would recommend, but it was. But
leads
yeah, I
to
mean,
stronger hazing?
I just looked around and I was like, oh well, I need somebody to help with customer service. Great, can you come help with this? Answer some of these customer service emails. And okay, we had some consulting work to do. Oh, great. I knew one of my other friends was a programmer. And I said, okay, great. I kind of scoped everything out and could kind of just hand them the project. Here's read this thing, look at this thing, look at this thing, make it do this, right? And then I'd get it back, look at it, make sure it did it, and then hand it to the client. And so yeah, just basically very opportunistically hired up all the people around me.
And you completely bootstrapped that company, right? You never took outside
I did, yeah. So I mean, at first there was this first customer paying me $50 a month, and I was hosting it like in my dorm room on the school's network on the computer my parents bought me. Like I hadn't paid for anything, it didn't have any expenses, so that was could just let that ride. But at the point where I started making kind of hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars a month, I started to feel like, okay, there's some liability here. What does it mean to be a real business? I was intimidated by that, and so the first thing I did was I went to one of my mentors who had a small business that he had just started, and I said, hey, I was afraid of doing the business by myself, so I was like, can I just make mine like a sub company, like a part of your business? And I did it actually under him for a few months until I realized that was stupid. There was nothing. I was actually just I was giving him a percentage of a cut of all the money I collected, and he wasn't really doing anything. And so I was like, he wasn't doing anything wrong. He was doing what I asked him to do, but there was I wasn't getting any real benefit out of it, and I got more comfortable with it, and I eventually incorporated myself. But yeah, I basically just was able to start again in my dorm room on the computer my parents bought me. Someone was paying me. Someone paid me a little bit more. I had a credit card. I got a couple $1,000s for on the credit card racked up. And basically bootstrapped it from there and was able to incrementally grow it. By the time I graduated 4 years later, I was doing hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in revenue. It's like looking at the businesses that we build today or the businesses I see now, it's not. I consider that more of a lifestyle business. It wasn't like some big business, but I was totally the richest college kid around. Like I was,
right.
Like I was awesome.
I'd say that's a lot of money.
It was awesome when I was in college, yeah, and I thought I was like top of the world. And so it was, at that point I had the luxury of being able to say, okay, what do I want to do? Do I want to go interview and take a job somewhere? Do I want to keep doing this and run this business that I have? And I did both of those things. I came down here and took a job at Trilogy, which was as far from a real job as you can get, but was where I was put into an incubator and was doing startups there, and then I continued to run that on the side.
And what the heck did your parents think? Were they supportive, or were they?
My parents.
You need to.
I never had those kinds of issues with my parents. My
Yep.
parents were pretty supportive. I was just talking with them recently and thinking about now I have kids and I'm trying to raise them, and I just was on a mission. I always had stuff I wanted to go do, and I definitely got into trouble, but I was generally doing good stuff, and even the trouble my dad would look at and go like, oh yeah, I would have done that too. So they were pretty supportive. Like they could tell I was on a path and doing stuff, and I didn't drop out of school. I was doing it on the side. And so they were okay.
Why work at Trilogy while you're doing your own business? Like that seems pretty stressful.
Yeah, that was a great question.
So
Trilogy, which I don't know how many of you who's heard of Trilogy. So not that many of you. So I came here. I graduated in 1999, which is the peak of the first .com boom. And Trilogy was a very, very large, growing company here in Austin, started by a guy named Joe Lemont. And they were recruiting very heavily from Stanford, MIT, Carnegie Mellon, and a lot of other top tech schools. They were competing against, at the time, Microsoft and maybe Google's around. I don't think so. But all the people that were doing the top recruiting. And they had an enterprise software business, similar to SAP or Oracle today. But they also were putting $100 million into an incubator to go create new internet startups. And they were particularly looking for entrepreneurs to be part of that incubator. And so even though I had my own company and I thought I was king of the world and I didn't need to do anything, another friend of mine, John Berkowitz, had graduated a semester before me, and he'd come down here to work at Trilogy. And he said, hey, you should really come check this out. One, Trilogy is super cool. It is surrounded by a lot of really smart people that are doing really interesting things, and you could learn a lot here. And they're looking for entrepreneurs. They're looking for people like you to come do really cool things. And two, Austin's really cool. Austin's a great place, and I think you'd really like it if you check it out. And so I came down to interview with them, and loved Austin and loved the environment at Trilogy. And Joe, the CEO of Trilogy, basically sold me saying, hey, look, one, you've been running this business on the side in school, So I don't care. You can keep running it on the side. Go ahead, bring it down with you. And so there's no downside for you. 2, I'm going to surround you with a whole bunch of really smart people. You've been doing this all by yourself. I'm going to surround you with all these really smart people.
Right.
I'm going to give you a bunch of money to go learn things and try things and do things, and you can learn on my dime. And then when you're done, you can go back and go run your company. And he was trying to sell me to join the company, so I don't think he really expected me to actually do that.
Right,
but that is
sure.
exactly what I did.
Right.
And it worked great. And it moved me to Austin and introduced me to so many great people. I learned so much while I was at Trilogy and from a lot of really great people and got some great experiences. We launched the company in 3 months. We sold it a year later for $20 million. I was doing sales in one role there, and I went and got $1 million sale. Like, I closed $1 million deal, which was really a great milestone for me personally. Really built my confidence and other things. It turns out that's the same as doing any other deal. It just has more zeros at the end, but you have to do that to know that. So it was a great experience for me. And then it turned out, because we built it and we sold the company a year later, it was just a natural time for me to exit as we sold the other company. And then, what do you know? My company was still growing, and that was actually now the first time I was focused on my company full time.
Right.
It was about 2000 when I left Trilogy, and then it started to really go.
So you were at Trilogy for how many years then?
Just one.
Okay, just one.
Yeah.
And
I basically got the most fun part of Trilogy, like the peak
Right.
of the dot-com boom, just from 99 to 2000. And then the dot-com boom ended, and it wasn't as fun of a place to be anymore.
Right. And we initially met in 2003 or 4. Or
I think,
what was it?
probably 3
Yeah.
at a Bootstrap Austin event, maybe.
And you were still bootstrapping it. You never took any money.
Yeah, I never took any money for that business.
And then we became intertwined because you asked me if you should sell the business.
Well, no, I think we must have gotten together before that.
We did.
Because
no,
Bizarre Voice
but
was
that's where
before
we
that.
became really close.
Yeah.
Through
Yeah,
that
and so
moment.
so then it was and it was really an issue of, do I sell the business or go raise money? Which is interesting. That's often be a choice that you would face. Is it's kind of like, do you exit the business or double down, and go further? And that was a really tough choice, because that was my baby. I'd been working on it for 10 years. I'd put, as far as I was concerned, my whole life into it, and certainly at the time. And it's really scary to think about what that means to go into this, to sell your company, to go through that experience, to lose control. You're trying to figure out what's the right amount of money, what's worth it, what's not worth it, and there was a lot of tough things to figure that out. That was the selling your first company is the most emotional,
Sure.
hardest part. After that, it's always emotional, but it's like not nearly as tough as the first time.
And so that was your first significant financial event.
Yeah. And to
in
be
your
honest,
life.
that was one of the biggest reasons I decided to do it then, is I felt like I used a racetrack analogy a lot at the time, and it was like, I need to get all the way around the track, because I know I want to do more than one company. I want to do more than one lap around the track, and so I need to finish this lap so I can go do
Right.
another one. And just like anything you do a second time, you learn a lot, and it's a lot easier and often better, the next time. And
Yeah.
I wanted to get to that second time.
So then, what did you do right after you sold it? You've got now financial independence. You're in a totally different mindset.
I bought a Tesla.
Yeah, I know.
That was one of
I
the
remember.
That was one of the first things.
No, I remember that.
What did I do? So
Actually, you ordered one.
yeah, I
took
ordered
like
it.
3
and
years.
I had to wait
right.
3 years for it to come, but I paid for it. So the first thing when you sell your company, almost all the time, you're actually committed to staying part of the company, because usually they want you, in addition to the company, to be part of it, because as the founder. And so I had a pretty typical kind of 2-year deal
Right.
where I was expected to stay on and be with the company. And the way they enforce that is they put some big chunk of money sitting out there that says, if you are still here 2 years from now, this is what you get. So I spent, the first year after selling your company is, I find I've done it a couple times now, is actually goes by really, really fast and is primarily transition. There's all this stuff to do now because you just sold the company. So you have to announce it, and then you have to talk to all the employees, and they have to meet all the other people they're going to work with and work for, and then kind of integrating the organization to be part of the other company, which basically means taking everybody that used to report to you and getting them to report to somebody else. And then you get to the end of that process, and that's usually like a year later. And then you get to kind of start to say, okay, what's my role now? What am I going to be part of this new company? What can I do there? Do I go on to do something else? So in the case of my first company, that first year went really fast. Second year was completely frustrating and very, very emotionally difficult for me. And it was interesting. The reason it was so hard was actually because I didn't have enough to do. That we had transitioned everything, and the new company didn't really empower me to go do a lot of new things. And I didn't feel fulfilled, even though I actually kind of had a dream job. Like I had an apartment in New York, and I had my place here that was paid for by them, and I could fly back and forth whenever I wanted, and I got paid a lot of money, and I didn't really have anybody reporting to me. I didn't have that much I had to do. Like, it sounds great, but it was actually completely frustrating and really emotionally taxing.
So what was your darkest moment with Skyless? It wasn't all rosy, right?
No way. I mean, doing a startup, and particularly bootstrapping one, it's just like a series of thinking you're about to fail until it actually works. Like the whole time, everything's about to fall apart, and then until you get to some kind of sustainable part. And so, I remember in particular, as we started the business, and like a lot of people might do, I first was running it where I didn't actually have any employees. Everybody who worked for me was a contractor. And different states have different laws about what makes someone an employee versus a contractor. I'd say it's probably pretty common that a lot of small companies kind of fudge those rules a little bit because it's just less paperwork and easier and less taxes and other things not to have to pay everyone as a contractor. And so for the first couple of years where everybody's doing it part-time and other things like that, everybody got paid as a contractor. And then at one point I had 10, 15 employees, and we started to realize my tax advisor and legal advisor started saying, like, hey, you really need to change these people to be employees because they're really employees. And so we go through the process and we change the structure of the company and we get everyone set up as an employee and we register properly and we do all these other things. We get health insurance but I didn't actually pay any of the taxes. So then, like 6 months later.
No one is here from the IRS.
Right, nobody's here from the IRS.
Sorry, the government's shut down.
Yeah, government's shut down right now. We're safe. So then, wait, the IRS isn't shut down. I don't think. Essential services.
True,
yeah. So then, it comes towards the end of the year, and suddenly I get this bill from the IRS, and they're like, "You owe us like $100,000, like more than that," and I remember, I can just remember feeling my face flush, like feeling like really embarrassed and scared, and that was a really lot of money at the time. Like that was really, I'd never been in trouble with the IRS. I didn't know, were they gonna come break the door down? Were they gonna like freeze all our bank accounts? Did they expect me to pay this tomorrow? Like, this is all the stuff I'm thinking. I didn't realize that actually owing $100,000 to the IRS is not really that big of a deal, and lots of people do that. And they'll put you on a payment plan, and like you can negotiate it, and like there's all these other things. It's totally a workable situation. But there was about a week or two where I was really, really stressing it, and I really felt terrible. And it's the kind of thing like when it's your business and something like that happens, like you don't just get sad about it. I mean, it affects you physically in other ways. Like, I mean, it's like I couldn't eat. I wouldn't, I was depressed. I was like, I mean, it's like it really hits you. And all these people that were depending on me that I kind of felt like I'd let down, right? That, and again, I'm thinking like, is my whole business going to go away? Like, what's going to happen? So that's something I'll always remember as a really dark time for me. That actually turned out to be nothing. I mean, that's the other one of the lessons out of it. Like, it was totally not a big deal. It was negotiable. We got on payment plan. About a couple months later, it was all paid off. It no problem.
One of my mentors told me, it's never as good as you think it is. It's never as bad as you think it is.
It's probably pretty true.
So then we did get into a formal business relationship with Bizarre Voice.
Yes. I thought I was doing Brett a favor. Turns out he was doing me a favor. I often think about that.
Well, we need to get to market fast.
Yeah.
And Brant and I came to Josh and his team and said, can you guys build the first version of ratings and reviews?
Yeah, so
I
had a fairly
3 months.
Large team up and running with a bunch of programmers, and yeah, Brett needed to get going, and so that was a lot of fun, and turned out, again, I kind of thought I was doing him a favor. Like, I just met him fairly recently. He was starting a new company. I knew he was a successful guy. He'd started some other successful companies. I liked him. But I thought I was just kind of doing him a favor and helping to build this new company he had an idea for, which I'll embarrassingly admit, like, I didn't really even totally get it. Like, I was like, you're going to do ratings and reviews? Like, people going to pay you a lot of money for that? Like, I didn't totally understand it. But I was like, you know what, we'll do this and, see what happens later. And whatever. And as a result, Brett, being a very good entrepreneur, he was watching his budget really carefully. So he beat me up on the price for that, where at first I thought I was going to make a little bit of money, and by the end of it, I think I was losing a little bit of money. Like, I think it was $12,000 a month you're paying for,
I think that's
for
right.
for like 2 or 3 people. So it was probably costing me like $15,000. I mean, he's mostly covering it, but not quite. But then in addition to that, I got a stock option grant that was, and it was, I would assume, he told me at the time, and I believe, but I really had no reference point. It was like kind of like what a first employee would get. And I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know like what percentage of the company it was or anything. You couldn't do any calculations to say what it would be worth or anything. But it turned out to be worth millions of dollars. That turned out to be worth a lot of money. So that turned out worked out pretty well, and turned out Brett was doing me a favor.
Could have turned out to be worth 0.
It could have been nothing, but it turned out to be worth a lot of money.
So then after Skylist, and you got the mojo back, and decided you were kind of frustrated, wanting to create something else, you created Other Inbox.
Yeah, which was actually my
Talk
third
about
company.
that.
There was a second company in the middle that spun out
I forgot
of
about the
Skylist.
second
But Other Inbox was interesting because in particular, I was like, okay, I've done 2 companies now. I'm kind of a badass. Like, I know what I'm doing, and I'm going to go do something really big. And I've got this really big idea. I was talking to you a lot at the time, and I had some different ideas, and there was Other Inbox, and there was the backup thing. Remember the backup idea? There was the thing I was thinking about at the time, which now Backupify, or whatever they're called now, is like basically that business model.
Yep.
And I was like, okay, I've got this idea, I've got this thing I've been doing, and I understand email and marketing, how it works, and this is gonna really change things. And so I had this whole thing. We went into stealth, and we worked on it, we raised some money, and then we launched it, and it wasn't really the right idea. And then we kind of accidentally fell into what became the right idea out of that. But it was an interesting lesson for me in that I'm sure people do come up with like really good, brilliant ideas and go like, that's the thing, but pretty much everything that's worked for me has been much more of an opportunity that just kind of slapped me in the face. Like someone offered to pay me to run their server on my network, or a law got passed that changed all the rules for what we were doing, so we had to make something for that. Or in the case of Other Inbox, Yahoo came along and said, hey, we're launching an app store. Can you make that work for our thing? And we're like, no, it can't really work with your thing, actually, because it only works with Gmail. And then we kind of like reconfigured it and kind of dumbed it down a little bit. We thought we were dumbing it down. We thought we were like hurting the product, like taking stuff out of it. Turned out that actually made it so everybody could use it. And then Yahoo got about 3 million people to sign up and use it.
And that company had a pretty good outcome as well.
Other Inbox.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say it's, it was a single. It wasn't like a huge success exit-wise, because we had an inflection point where, again, like I was saying before, we could have either raised more money or sold the company. And what we did is we sold it to a company that could then take what we were doing and bring it to market much faster. And so actually, when I say it was a single, part of it is because it's not fully realized yet. So a big chunk of the compensation comes in stock. That company's still going. That's Return Path, which is a big company and doing well, and will probably go public sometime in the next couple of years, and then maybe it will be a home run after that. But right now, it was primarily about what's the best way to grow this and to make it move forward, and we're able to do that with Return Path. And so, so I kind of think of it in the middle.
So when does Capital Factory enter into all of this? Post Other Inbox, or you were kind of in parallel doing?
Yeah, I was already doing Other Inbox, and I was still doing Other Inbox, and it was the end of 2008. And it was the economic downturn around the housing market, which for me was my second economic crash. So the first one was the first .com crash, which I had been through and was pretty much weathered really well, because that was right as I was leaving Trilogy, and even though it was the .com crash, actually Skylist really boomed and did really well during that time, so I didn't really feel that. But I'd lived through it, and I'd heard all these stories about it, and I knew about it, and so then this was happening again, and this seemed a little different. Like the .com crash was primarily in the US, whereas this was clearly global.
Yeah,
and
it was very different.
It was very different, and I could feel that, and I could sense, and the thing that I remember the most was just this feeling of kind of helplessness, of like, wow, there's all this stuff changing around me that I can't control,
Right.
that I can't influence. And as an entrepreneur, one of the great things is like feeling like you're in control and you can influence things and make decisions and make things happen. So I really didn't like that. And so then I was, also hopefully as an entrepreneur, I was like, okay, well, what can I do about it? What's my response to this thing? How do I do something about it? How do I control it? And I felt like both at the micro scale and at the macro scale, the best thing I could do was go help start more companies. Because I really believe that entrepreneurs and technology were still going to, I didn't think like that the tech boom was over, like the internet wasn't going to continue to make things work better, faster, cheaper, more transparently, and everything like it's still doing. And yet at the same time also feeling like, wow, maybe we're at a local minimum. Like maybe we're at a valley and things are bad, which means from here on it's going to get better, right? And that actually sounded like a great time to go start a whole bunch of companies, when you're going to have a rising tide effect, when the economy is going to be getting better around you, when other people probably aren't starting companies right now, so maybe there's less competition. There's something that you can do about it. And so that was, I think, if there was any kind of impetus, it was the market crash. Combine that with Y Combinator had just started and Techstars had just started, and I kind of was like following those and thought they sounded super fun and super cool. And I'd been through Trilogy University, which was also in many ways like an incubator kind of boot camp type thing. So I had some experience with that, knew that was really fun. And so it was a combination of, one, this feeling and what can I do about it, and two, wow, that actually looks like the most fun thing I could go do. Let's go do that. Why doesn't Austin have one of those? We should do that too.
And how do you measure the success of Capital Factory today?
Oof. That's a good question. I feel like we're just barely starting to see some of those things. In the end, the things that I take the most pride in are, first of all, just the people that are involved and what they say and what they get out of it. And so, one, it's just hearing from people who tell me how much it's helped them or it's changed their lives or what they've done and why it's made a difference for them and the people that it inspires. So that feels really good, although that's kind of hard to measure. The thing I'm counting is how many millionaires we make. How many people's lives we change by kind of freeing them from having to work for somebody else and allowing them to be an entrepreneur, allowing them to, because what do entrepreneurs do? They go change the world. It's kind of by definition. Like you have to make something better, faster, cheaper, fix something. And people do that about things that they're passionate about. And that's to me is like the greatest gift you could give anybody, is the ability to go do what they're passionate about and make a difference, and not necessarily kind of work for somebody else. And so that's the thing I'm measuring. The things other people I think measure us by would be how many companies get funded, how much money do they raise, do they have an exit, how many jobs do we create, how many kind of press and attention and things like that. And I think we do really well along all those different things.
Yeah.
But I kind of look at it more at people level.
Yeah, I think a lot about that with Bizarre Voice, and I'm very proud of the fact that it's created 800 jobs, most of them here in Austin, and that it's created now 14 companies and counting.
Amazing.
People coming out. So the ripple effects are very real, and that's why I'm so bullish on Capital Factory, because I really see the beginning of something great. It's very, very exciting. So a lot of people in the room probably don't realize that you also teach here at UT.
I do, yeah. That's my one night a week. My class is that.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. It's with
Dr.
Bob Metcalf.
Yes. So I teach the Longhorn Startup Program with Dr. Metcalf and with Ben Dyer, so two incredible entrepreneurs that have been much, much more successful than I have. So I get to learn from them every day too, just like everybody else. And we have a couple different components to our program. The core of it is our seminar, which is a weekly evening program on Thursday nights. It's a pass-fail course that anybody from any school can take, and even if you're not enrolled, you're welcome to come sit in on. And it happens Thursday nights. We bring in speakers on founders kind of telling their story of how they started their company, talking about specific startup topics and things people need to learn, and really kind of getting people inspired and energized about entrepreneurship. We have a lab that goes along with that. And the lab is for students who actually have a startup. It's not students who want to build a startup. It's like they actually have something. They have a product and a customer. Like they built something and someone's kind of using it. And the idea is to give them as much as we can of the kind of experience they would get at Capital Factory or Y Combinator or somewhere else, which is connecting them with mentors, with people from the community that have actually been through this before, that can help them, that can point them in the right direction and introduce them to people, giving them as many of the resources of the school that we can put behind them, giving them an office, getting them other support from the school, tapped into the university IP and other resources, having other free things they get like legal work or hosting or other things, just as much support as we can get behind them. And most importantly, just time, getting them time to work on their startup where they get credit that really counts towards graduation for the time they're spending on their startup. And then finally, Dr. Metcalf teaches does a studio once a month, which is an opportunity for professors to show off the entrepreneur research that they're working on and show that to the greater community. And there's actually a few other things now starting to come out of the Longhorn Startup Program too. I can't even keep track of all of them.
And how many business students do you have in the class, you think?
It's ranged a lot semester to semester. I would say we probably have 10 or 15 this semester.
Right.
And that's probably on the lower end. We've had more other semesters.
Okay.
But we generally get a lot, half to 2/3 are engineering and computer science students.
Right.
And then a broad mix of management, communications, economics, other disciplines.
So this is a McCombs event. We've got to change that.
Yes.
Seriously, I mean, it's an amazing program and an amazing opportunity for folks. So it's been quite an amazing year for you.
It's been fun.
President Obama visits Capital Factory.
Yeah, that was really cool.
That was really
high
cool.
watermark, for sure.
What's the inside story on that? Did he just call you? You're hanging out at home
Yeah,
by the
yeah.
fire
He just gave me a call, It was very fortunate that he was planning a trip to Austin and particularly to talk about economic development and what's driving that, what makes Austin so great, and I'm sure there were lots of different things that they could highlight as part of that. And we were really fortunate to be part of that and to be as part of what he kind of focused on as what's driving innovation and the growth here in Austin. And so he also went to Applied Materials, a very large company here that helps drive that. He went to one of the local high schools that's doing some really innovative things. And he came by Capital Factory as part of that too. And so I got some email maybe about 3 weeks before from someone from the White House White House Communications Office saying, hey, we have a senior administration official thinking about making a trip down there. Could we maybe stop by next week and talk to you about it? I'm thinking it's like, we get a lot of other people coming through, ambassadors and senators and people like that. I'm thinking it's some other person like that. But then the next Monday, these 3 people in suits show up, and 2 of them are definitely Secret Service. Like they're just, you can just tell from the way that they handle themselves and what they do. And so I'm thinking, okay, maybe this is like the vice president or somebody. It's like somebody like more important. And so we're talking to them, and then we start planning things out, and they're talking about like we're gonna have to shut down that whole street, and we're gonna have to do this thing over here, and suddenly it was like, and then they started referring to him as him and him and him, and so I was like, okay, I think maybe this is really the president, and then they made 1 or 2 other comments that then I was pretty sure it was the president, even though they still hadn't said so, then I don't think we really got confirmation until about a week before. Mm-hmm. Then they really started to confirm everything, and we knew what it was going to be. And then for that next week, there was Secret Service in our office the whole week, the whole time. They installed phone lines. They it was actually really fun. They were so nice, and they were so apologetic because they were like in our office, and they're like, "Oh, we're so sorry, we're in the way." Everyone's like, "No, this is so cool. Like, stay here as long as you want. Like,
please don't leave."
Yeah, it was actually really, really fun.
Yeah, and how cool was it that he picked Austin as the start of his job tour?
It was great. And regardless of your political affiliation, I mean, to me that was not a political event for us. It wasn't about anyone's particular agenda or anything, but more just recognizing what was going on and respecting the role that he's in. He was awesome. He was just so great, so easy to talk to, such a great communicator, totally present. He spent about 45 minutes with us. 5 startups got to pitch him and give him their pitch. He didn't invest in any of them, but he
did have his CTO with him, and he said, "Can you do the due diligence?"
Yeah, right. but it was great. And what I was really impressed the most with about his communication skills and what he did with that is he heard these 5 pitches. And I mean, I don't know how many of you guys have worked on your startup pitch, but it's really hard. Like, it's really hard to get a short pitch. A long pitch is easy. You can ramble forever. To get your pitch down to something you can say quickly and shortly and have people really understand it, very, very difficult. It's very hard. It's something we spend weeks working on and practicing. And he heard these 5 pitches. They each about 2 minutes each. So we're talking 10 minutes or maybe 15 minutes that he heard this. And then about 2 hours later, he gave a speech at Applied Materials, which I also went to. And in that speech, he said, he's like, hey, I just came from Capital Factory, and I saw that he met a few of these startups. Let me tell you about. There was this one, and in 2 sentences, he gives this pitch for this startup that he had just heard. I mean, he didn't know who they were. He had just heard them, 2 hours before. And it was the best pitch for that startup they'd ever had. Like, it was
sure.
like he just totally boiled it down and made it so, it was like anybody there could have understood what it was. And it was like, I called up all the startups after, like, go listen to what he said. That's how you describe your company.
Right.
And so just as a communicator, I was like totally blown away. Like, he really just immediately got it, was listening, could distill it down to what the core essence was, and could really communicate that clearly to other people. And it's really hard to do.
And, it's not a political statement, but I was so impressed with his intellect and his ability to rapid fire assimilate those pitches and fire questions.
And even just pay attention. I'm checking my phone all the time when I'm talking to somebody. Like, he has so many things on his mind, and he was totally present. He was totally focused. There's nothing else pulling at him.
And then this weekend, ACL's rained out, and you say, well, what the hell? I'm going to get Lionel Richie to play at someone's house.
Yeah, we called Obama for that. That was
really. You just said, can you get him to do that?
No. Yeah, that was really fun too. That was a different kind of fun. But yes, that's being an entrepreneur. That's like turning opportunity out of challenges.
Josh calls me.
Lemons out of lemonade.
True story. Sunday. It's like 1 p.m. in the afternoon. It's like, hey, I'm putting together this thing. Do you want to come? Lionel Richie's going to play for 50 people in someone's living room. Like, dude, I'm with the kids, for one thing. It's the weekend. Are you serious? You're going to pull this off? And I got a text I texted Josh about 11 o'clock at night. I was like, did you actually pull that off? And he said yes. And I was just like, I'm in awe. I mean, I don't know anybody in Austin that could have pulled that off with that little time.
That was a magic trick, but it was fun.
It was insane.
Yeah. And I don't know if you guys this is a younger crowd, you may not realize it, but I didn't even know how much of a Lionel Richie fan I was until I saw him play at ACL. Everybody knows every single word to every one of his songs. It was super, super fun. That was really great.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So, you're a busy guy, and you've got 3 beautiful children, got a beautiful wife. How on earth do you stay balanced?
Wow. I think a lot of people ask me that, and they meet my wife, and they're just like, "Do you ever see your husband?" And she's like, "Yeah, I do."
Right.
But it's it's funny. I think that's something that's really different for everybody, and I've learned that about myself. It's like I think one thing is you don't find your balance by comparing yourself to everybody else, because it's really different for everybody.
Sure. Comparing yourself to everybody else is a surefire way to depression.
Yeah,
as
right.
opposed to enlightenment.
But yeah, I actually feel like I have a really great balance. I think I don't do some things that a lot of other people do that give me some extra time. Like, I don't really watch TV. I'm not really into sports. I feel like that gives me like an extra 20 hours a week, compared to half the people I know. But yeah, I mean, I love what I do, and I wake up every morning, and I roll out of bed, and I'm super excited about what I'm going to go do that day. I get a good night's sleep every night. I usually sleep 7-8 hours, which I think surprises a lot of people. But it's like if I get 8 hours of sleep, I can work the rest of the time I'm awake, the whole and not be. But if I get 6 hours of sleep, I'm kind of I'm dragging that whole day. So I've learned I need to get a good night's sleep. And then as far as my family and other things go, my thing is I try to get up in the morning and make sure that I do the most important things first. So on my calendar, that's I wake up and I go play with my kids, and then if I try to do something healthy, or I eat something good, and I try to get some exercise or do something good, and I try not to schedule meetings in the morning. That only works so well, but I've got some time for me to get whatever I think is the most important thing I want to get done that day done, and then the rest of my day starts to then fill up. And then I also have to think a lot about evenings, especially, most importantly, now that I have young kids.
Right.
And so it's really easy for all my evenings to fill up during the week, and then for me to need to go to a hackathon on the weekend, and then go to judge some 3-day startup thing on Sunday night, and then so I'm definitely so I've got a date night on the week with my wife once a week, where it's like Wednesday nights is date night, and that's like time for us to get some time to go out together. And then with my kids, I try to make sure that there's some balance in there too. That I'm always home for them in the evenings, at least like half the nights if I can.
Mm-hmm.
But I find that works really well for me. Like I feel like I get lots of time with my wife and I get lots of time with my kids, and I'm super happy. But I do think that's really different for everybody.
So you're a bit of a productivity guru. Always call you up, or Deborah always calls you up when we need advice on different productivity tools.
/ IT support. Yes.
/ IT support sometimes. What are some of what's like your top 3 favorite productivity tools for people in here?
Favorite productivity tools? I was not expecting you to ask that. That's a great question.
I'm trying to keep you on your toes.
Yeah. So let's see. So most of it happens on your phone these days, right? So I certainly use. I think I've crossed the cusp where I use my phone more than my computer now. Not like completely, but getting there. And so I would look here. So one, and I'm up to disclosure. I'm an investor in this company. But one's this app called Tout app, and basically what it lets you do is queue up email templates. So I've got there's a couple emails I send a lot. So I've got one email that's like my business card. I don't print business cards anymore. And so it's like an intro and my bio and my LinkedIn and my V card, and then if you want to keep reading, a whole bunch of other stuff about sign up for the Startup Digest and do those other things. And so when I meet somebody, I can just launch this and type in their email address and fire that off to them really quick. It's a tool that's actually made for salespeople. So if you're doing sales stuff and you meet somebody, you can do that. But it's also great with your fundraising for your investors. So you have your investor emails. You meet an investor and then you want to send them your deck or your NDA or your something else, or you don't just send investors NDAs, but it's also good for sending NDAs. But so you can kind of queue up all your investor communications, and it tracks if they opened it or not, and some other things that you can go see. So that's pretty good for that. I use Evernote. I use a to-do list manager called OmniFocus for my personal to-dos, and then Asana for managing my team and all their kind of tasks and stuff like that. I use a thing called Text Expander, which is on the phone or on your computer, which basically just lets you make little short phrases that then expand into big chunks of stuff. So I have a lot of those things I can do a lot. And I'm a pro at, I never thought I would ever say this, but I'm a pro at Eventbrite, Facebook events, setting up stuff online. I can somehow I can just, I don't know what it is, but I do all that really fast because I'm doing that all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So students enter in the room. They're here. They're obviously interested in entrepreneurship, I'm assuming, or they wouldn't be here. What's your best advice for them? They're in school.
So, I think there's kind of 2 groups of things. There's someone who knows they want to do something and they know what they want to do. They're super passionate about it. That's kind of the best thing, because then you're you're focused and you know what it is and you're there. And then it's just do it. Just dive in as fast as you can, get experience with it, learn about it, but start doing it as soon as you can, because kind of that racetrack analogy, the sooner you make it one time around the loop, the sooner you learn about it, the easier it's going to be, the faster it's going to go, the sooner you can go take another lap. And with all due respect to the business school and other things, I think there's a lot of valuable skills that you can learn here. There's a lot you can learn on the job, as you're doing it, and a lot of people do that. And it's different skills. There's other things, but and then some of them, the sooner you get doing it, the better. If you don't know what you want to do, if you don't have something you're passionate about, then find someone who's passionate about something and latch on to them. And find a way that you can be part of something and that you can learn from that. Because even if you didn't start Bazaar Voice, there were so many people at Bazaar Voice that learned so much in that process that now they're ready to go do it, right? Maybe, take Garrett, from Compare Metrics. And so he was at Bazaar Voice, he was on a team there, He learned about all kinds of stuff. He learned about their business. He learned about their customers. He learned how to grow a team. He met all these people he wanted to go work that he could go work with. So then after Bizarre Voice, now he was inspired. Then he was passionate. Then he knew the thing he wanted to go do. And he had all the tools and the resources and the people and the experience. Then you needed to go pull all that together. So if you don't have that thing, go latch onto somebody else. But I do think as a student, this is an incredible time to start a company or to be involved in a startup. And it's only going to get harder for you. You'll get other advantages later, but in a lot of ways, this is the best time. For one, and obviously this is a generalization, I'm sure there's exceptions here as well, but you don't really have a life yet. And when I mean that in all the best ways, but like as over time, life just accumulates. You meet more and more people that you care about. And just think of like how many birthdays you have to go to or celebrate, right? Like you get more of them as you know more people, right? You become part of things. You get passionate about other organizations, other charities or groups, or you get into dancing or bowling or whatever it is you do. You collect all these things that take up your time that you need to do. And then eventually you have a family. And that takes up a lot of time and isn't really important.
That's when the birthdays really kick in.
Then the birthdays really kick in.
You go to all the kids' birthdays.
Like I have 3 kids. If I want to take all of them to ACL, I have to take like 1 each day.
3 and multiplied by 10 friends apiece.
Right.
So you've got 30
and then
days
sports
of
games,
birthdays.
all these things are coming. And so one of your biggest advantages you have right now is that you have more time than Brett. Like I guarantee you, if you go start a company right now, the amount of hours you will put into it is twice what Brett will. And even if, I'm not saying Brett's slacking off or anything, he's just got a whole bunch of other stuff he's got to go do. And he has other advantages that allow him to go faster, that make it good for him to start a company now. But your advantage is you can work twice as much, and you can do twice as much. And that is a huge advantage. That is a really big advantage. And you can do a lot with a little. And so I think that's one great reason to start it now, and to start it in college.
I mean, I will say, while I was in school, and I'd love to hear your comment on this if you were still getting 7-8 hours of sleep a week, but when I was in school, I was so passionate about being an entrepreneur that I was working on my startups until 3, 4 in the morning almost every single night.
Yeah.
I mean, I just had boundless energy.
And that gets harder as you get
commitments.
older. I mean, unfortunately.
Yeah. So
I
totally
in
agree.
a fraternity house, it would be like
now.
Friday night, and the party started at 10. And so, like 10:30, I'm still at my computer working, but I've got like the door open so I can hear the party. And there's people like kind of like walking by, and of course they're all making fun of me. The whole like, what? Why are you working? What are you doing,
Right.
loser? Come party, what? Whatever.
But then you're like, hey, I'm responsible for your paycheck. Don't forget that.
now I can say that. But and I would.
No, I'm saying you were employing your
well,
frat
a couple
brothers.
of them. Yeah, a couple of them. But and I'd still go to the party, but I would work till maybe 11, right?
Right.
And it was already party was already going, and then I'd go downstairs and party for a while, and then probably about 2 o'clock, I'd probably be back upstairs working again and like doing
Right.
something else, right?
That's how it's done. Why don't we open it up to questions from the audience? We have a little bit of time left. And do you mind, is it too much to ask you to go up to the mic, or do you just want to shout it out and I can repeat it? I can hear you.
I can speak.
Why don't I repeat
Sure.
it, just so it'll show well on video?
I love your philosophy about helping other people build entrepreneurship. I think that's great, and I feel the same way.
Quit their jobs.
Quit their jobs.
Yeah.
Agreed, totally. I've helped people quit their jobs too. I'd love to hear your thoughts on crowdfunding via equity, and where you think, if at all, that's going to fit in with Capital Factory. It's a big open question that we don't know a lot about yet, but I'd just love to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah.
You mind just repeating?
So the question was, how does crowdfunding via equity fit into Capital Factory's plans, and what's that mean for startups? And I think it's a great thing. I'm really excited about it. I think we've been kind of teasing that area through things like AngelList, which weren't quite public fundraising, but we're pretty darn close to public fundraising already. And that's been a huge impact, has really helped a lot of companies to raise money and be successful. And so I think that's going to continue to do more of that. I think it's going to mean more companies getting funded more different ways, getting more resources, and that's only going to mean more good things. Lots of bad things will get funded. But that's the way this works. Like, not everything works, but more people trying is good. More people having the opportunity is good. And what I think is, you specifically said equity crowdfunding. Stepping back from that a minute, even just Kickstarter. What I love about Kickstarter is I see numerous companies who come along and can't get funded. They can't get anyone to invest in them. And they're like about to give up. It's like, oh crap, let's just throw up a Kickstarter. And then they raise $1 million on Kickstarter, right? And this thing that like couldn't get the VCs to believe in it, they actually just jumped over the VCs and got the customers to pay. And that's amazing, right? And then suddenly now the VCs all want to invest because they got a bunch of customers signed up and paying. And I think that's incredible. That's awesome. And I think we're going to see more opportunities for things that couldn't have gotten funded some other way and it just wouldn't have worked out. But it does work because there's more different resources to tap into. I think it's going to be great.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's radically disruptive and to the benefit of the entrepreneur. The only caveat I would say is that make sure you have good mentors. And sometimes those mentors are available at firms that do that for a living. And they have a level of pattern recognition. So if I invest in something on Kickstarter or something like that, I'm not going to have the same affinity as if I serve on their board and meet with them regularly and have coffee with them in Austin, that kind of thing. So, yeah.
So for both of you guys, a lot of
John, are you recording this whole thing on Google Glass? All right.
Took one photo.
Nice.
But so in both of your cases, and a lot of mentors I have as well, you're the person with your hands on the keyboard at the beginning, the mechanic, the engineer, person really archetyping this idea that you have. Then eventually you become the leader. Do you find yourself, or had you found yourself, where you felt yourself disconnecting as the knowledge expert, and then you were just the leader, or maybe not? And if it's not,
Sure.
How do you still remain the knowledge expert in that field because you're inundated with running the company instead of being with your fingers in grease?
You want to take that? Just repeat.
Yeah, so the question was, at some point as the company grows, if you start out as a kind of a technical founder or a business expert founder, you're really an expert at the problem, you're really knee-deep in it, and then at some point, the company grows to a point where other people take on those day-to-day tasks, and you're more running the company, not being the expert at the business. And what's that feel like, and how do you deal with it, and what's it like? And I definitely have gone through that. I was always the first kind of subject matter expert, and usually the first kind of technical person building it or doing something with it. And for me, the first part of that was actually just when I didn't even know the code well enough anymore. When it was like, realizing like I couldn't fix something, or like I can't go change something, or like the first time you think you're going to go change something and then you just break everything. And that was kind of weird. I kind of feel like a poser. Like I still think of myself as really technical, but I actually can't really build anything anymore, right? And so like I can still manage people that build stuff, and I can architect stuff, and I know how the things fit together, but like total bad use of time for me to go try to actually code anything anymore. And that actually feels kind of bad. And then the next level beyond that would be the even just like, are you the expert at the product kind of thing? I think that's easier to stay longer, because even as the leader of the company, you talk to a lot of customers and you're more involved in those ways. So that doesn't necessarily have to go, but certainly the feeling of like I built it, I know how it all works, I know exactly what we can do. And again, if you start in that role, then it's great, like in the initial sales and other things like that, like you can be talking to somebody and you know what the technical capabilities are, so you can make commitments and you can hit them. And then at some point that breaks down and you make some commitment that you can't really hit, and then you realize, okay, I can bring one of the other guys with me next time. So I think that's a natural kind of evolution. But for me, it's more the tech expertise that I felt like I lost more than the business expertise. I don't know what you thought.
It's a very disarming feeling to realize that you've transcended your background, and you now don't know how to program nearly as well as those that are in your company. And I actually think there's a great lesson, a very deep lesson here for entrepreneurs. I meet a lot of people in Austin that are their own worst enemy. And what I mean by that, and it's not just in Austin, it's anywhere, is that they are such perfectionists that they've got to have their arms on the entire business and know how everything functions. And they are literally strangling their business. And you've got to transcend that to grow. And the hardest thing for me in growing Bizarre Voice and going from, just me and my co-founder to over 800 people in that short a period of time is I'd never done that before. And so I had to transcend over and over and over again. I leveraged CEO Coach. I leveraged lots of people for different management and leadership training within the company. It also benefited me. I had 3 coaches just for the IPO event alone, which was gut-wrenching, and they were brutal on me and just simulated exactly what it'd be like to be in the room with people that manage trillions of dollars in capital just pounding on me with questions. And it's hard. I mean, it's very, very hard. But it's the only way. And I think that someone like a Michael Dell has transcended so many times, from the time he was a student here at UT till now, that it's almost miraculous.
His best advice is to make sure you're not the smartest person.
Michael Dell's best advice is to make sure you're not the smartest person in the room.
Surround yourself with people.
Yeah, I mean, that's very true. I mean, if you feel like you need to be, that's a real problem. You're probably one of those people that's strangling your business. There's no reason to be arrogant because there's always someone better looking, more successful, smarter, everything. I mean, any dimension you want to compare yourself in, it's just better to compare yourself to yourself and be your own critic.
One of the things I found with slightly related but a little bit of a tangent is with my first company, I strangled it a bit. I wanted everything to be perfect. I expected everything to be perfect. I was trying to make everything perfect, which you're never going to do. So I was a total hard ass. I was just really driving everybody really hard. I could not be nice to be around sometimes, and I had very high expectations, and I was really frustrated a lot. And I found with my second business, I realized that one, people make mistakes. So if people are making mistakes, that means you generally have bad systems. Like, don't try to make a plan that assumes nobody's going to make a mistake. Try to make a plan that allows for people to make mistakes, because people are going to make mistakes. And 2, that some of the problems or mistakes that you come across as your business grows are actually just the sign of it growing. And that in some ways, it's very inefficient to try to stay ahead of all the problems, because then you're doing stuff you don't need to do before that's a real problem. And sometimes the way you know that you need to evolve or change your business or work in a different way is because you start to hit some of those problems. And so with my first business, we'd hit a problem, and I'd be like, why did we have that problem? How do we make sure that never happens again? With my second business, it was like, that problem. That means we're at this size now. We're having that thing. I know how to deal with that problem. Cool. And so it wasn't nearly as stressful, because it was more actually even comforting. It was like, great, we're big enough to have that problem, and I know how to fix that problem. So great, well, now we'll fix that problem. We'll do that next thing. And that really helped me to let go and relax a little bit.
Yeah, I've been through the same. Who else? Let me go to her and then you. Yeah.
So you both have obviously worked abroad with entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs. What is the most important or defining characteristic that you've seen people in the early stages that have helped them move forward, that you've seen most people become successful?
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah.
So you want to repeat the question?
The question was, is there one trait or characteristic you've noticed among people that you see early on as an entrepreneur that tells you they're going to be successful?
I've got my answer.
Yeah, I'm sure there are a lot of different things to this. I'll tell you, I asked Kevin Kettler, who was at the time the CTO of Dell, I asked him a similar question, and he had said that the number one trait he looks for in this case it was an up-and-coming executive, but somebody that was able to be a leader, was the ability to make good decisions with less and less information. And because you never have perfect information, and you're to be able to move quickly and grow as the company grows and you kind of step higher up in the chain, you need to be able to do that more and more. So I think that's one interesting trait. The number one thing I really look for in an early stage entrepreneur and a first time entrepreneur, it's passion about the thing that they're doing. It's like, there's no perfect thing, and it's possible that somebody could be really passionate about it and hit the wall, but I think that's the number one thing that sticks out. Like, you meet somebody and you're like, that person is not going to fail. That person is not going to let any other option then winning be here because they're so passionate about what they do, and that's so compelling to everybody you meet, to investors, to customers, to anybody.
Yeah, it's similar to my answer. I mean, one thing I would encourage you to do while you're here at the university is go see every entrepreneur you can possibly see speak. And I bet that you'll find that they have one thing in common, because they all look different. You know, some are skinny, some are, fat, some are female, some are male, all different ethnicities.
Some are geeky, some are
et
really
cetera, right.
professional.
Yeah, some are academic type, etc. The only thing that you'll find that they have in common is persistence. And passion will make you persistent.
Yes.
And so whenever I'm looking at whether or not I'll invest in an entrepreneur, I'm looking at them to act like that. And a lot of people don't act that way. And they don't act that way because they're not genuinely passionate. The number one way that we ensured that we'd have a great culture at Bazaar Voice is we set up like massive obstacles for them getting a job. We made it brutally difficult, whereas the filter was so high. And at the last part of the process, after everything else, gave them a 16-hour test over the weekend to ensure that they wanted the job and that they were passionate about it. And that directly led to our company getting a lot of accolades for being the best place to work. It was that action. And I'm the same way when I'm looking at an entrepreneur. The entrepreneur should be undyingly persistent, passionate about it. And if they're not, then life's too short. Someone else will be. So why don't we have one last question? You had a question in the back, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, this question is for both of you. In the world of business and entrepreneurship, if you had to pick your maybe top 3 authors or visionaries or thinkers, who would you pick?
So the question is the top 3 authors that we would pick, but for business authors or just people that inspire us?
I guess I'm thinking more inspirational, whether it's
Okay.
psychology, entrepreneurship,
Sure.
kind of the business world, the economy.
Yeah. So the most inspirational book I read last year was called Abundance. And I wrote a very long review of that on my blog, lucky7.io. And I wrote a long blog post on it because I wanted to remember it 10 years from now, and I wanted to be able to reference back to it. So it's actually the longest book review. I've never written a book review that long for school. It's the longest book review I've ever written, period. And that's written by Peter Diamandis, who is the founder of SpaceX and all different types of enterprises, Singularity University, and it's absolutely a fascinating read, and it'll give you 100,000 business ideas if you just open your mind when you read it. I'm also a huge fan of the Patrick Lencioni books, all of them. I like the 5 Temptations of a CEO. I like them because they're fables, so you can really get into it and really get personal with the story. And if you've ever been a leader of anything, it'll speak to your soul really well. And I think the most important book ever written for entrepreneurs, and it's actually the only book that both Steve Jobs and Andy Grove both said, that their quote was something to the extent of, "This is the only business book I've read that has any value." Because neither one of them liked business books. And that book is The Innovator's Dilemma by Clayton Christensen. That is a phenomenal read, and that'll get your mindset to shift from it's already been done before to it's already been done before, and that's why I can disrupt the whole industry and take it down like Elon Musk is doing simultaneously in 3 industries at once.
Yeah, I'd really agree with Clayton Christopher and Innovator's Dilemma. Clayton's also just an incredible speaker. If you ever have a chance to see him or go, there's lots of his videos online. Very worthwhile to go watch him tell his story. I would name 3 books that I often recommend particularly to entrepreneurs. The first one, very tactical, really short read. It's a Ken Blanchard book called The 1 Minute Manager. It was one of the first management books I read. And Who Moved My Cheese is another one in that thing. That's a good one too. But in particularly, it's very short, it's fable-based, and it's really just about keeping it simple. And I think it's a management philosophy that's stuck with me for a long time. It probably doesn't work in every situation. It might not be the situation for a really big company. But for a lot of smaller companies, I think it works really well, and particularly when you're getting started. The second one is a book called The Hypomaniac Edge. And hypomania is like when you're a little bit crazy. And this book is about how entrepreneurs, and many of the most successful entrepreneurs, are all a little bit crazy. They're a little unusual in how they do things, and extreme, and really passionate, and have these kind of quirky traits. But they're just crazy enough to like make them go further than everybody else. But they're like highly functionally crazy. So it's like just enough that it actually works to their advantage versus like bringing them down. And it points to all these examples through history of people that had this trait. People, whether our founding fathers, Alexander Hamilton, and then Henry Ford, and other people moving up to Steve Jobs and other people like that, and pointing out these traits that you see about them. And it really gets back even just the people that immigrated here. You think about what it was like to get on a boat in the 1700s and move to the U.S. Like, you were getting on a boat for a multiple months journey that was dangerous, where people died, going to a place you've never seen a picture of, and you've never talked to anyone that's been there, in the hopes of making a new life and starting something new. That's about as entrepreneurial as it gets, and risky. And so that was the spirit of the kind of people that came here, and that was many of them fit that profile. So Hypomaniac Edge. And then the third one is for me, I think one of the most inspirational entrepreneurial books, and it's by a guy named Napoleon Hill, and it's called Think and Grow Rich. And that's the short version. There's a 16-volume longer version of it, but Think and Grow Rich. And Napoleon Hill actually went to Carnegie. I think it was Andrew Carnegie. Went to Andrew Carnegie, and he was trying to get a job with him, and wanted him to hire him. And he stalked him and sat outside his office, and finally got to meet with him, and kind of and asked him, what's your secret of success? How do you be successful? And Carnegie basically gave him a stipend and paid for him to go and research this, and introduced him to all the greatest entrepreneurs of the time. Charles Schwab and all these other kind of great entrepreneurs then, and got to ask them these questions. And so he talked to all these great entrepreneurs, and he tried to distill it down into what he saw as really being the secret to success. And I think it's hard to just tell you the answer. You have to kind of hear the stories to really get it. But a big part of what comes down to is really, I believe, is passion and really believing in yourself. And that's the common trait. Almost everybody that makes it believed in themselves, kind of by definition. But that's the hard thing. And the tough thing is, how do you believe in yourself and know that you're right versus crazy, right? And that's the entrepreneur's dilemma, right? Is you wouldn't be an entrepreneur and doing something differently if everybody else got it. By definition, you kind of must see something everyone else doesn't see, right? But at the same time, you don't want to be the delusional person going off and doing something that's totally not possible, right? That isn't a good idea, and that's why nobody. So how do you know which one you are? You don't. You got to figure that out for yourself.
I think the answer is you marry well.
That too, yeah.
Deborah's need to bless every business I've started. So hey, Josh, this has been a long time in the making.
Yeah.
Ever since we met. Really glad to know you, and thanks so much for doing this. It's a lot of fun.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.